Joseph Colombo was born June 16, 1923 in Brooklyn, New York. He was a major organized crime boss in the same city. When he was a teenager, his father, Anthony, who was a member of the Franzese family, one of the original 5 families of New York, was killed in a gangland war in 1938. He served in the Coast Guard during World War II, and he was diagnosed with neurosis in 1945 and was subsequently discharged the same year. When he got out of the Coast Guard, he worked as a longshoreman for 10 years and then as a salesman. He also married in 1945 a union that produced 5 children. He drifted into a life of petty crime, but eventually, like his father before him, became a member of the Franzese Borgata. Carl Syphax explains he was resented by other mafiosi because he had a reputation of being the mafia's Sam Glick, a man who got through sheer opportunism, not by brains or by muscle, but by thoroughly being a think. During this time, Colombo steadily moved up through the ranks. He was a good earner and one of the top enforcers, and Joseph Franzese, the boss of the family, later made him capo. But he died on June 6, 1962. Joseph Malioco, who was the family underboss at the time, took over. Supposedly, and probably accurately, Joe Bonanno wanted to knock off many of the heads of the commission, and Malioco went along with the plan. Malioco was tasked with hitting Lucchese and Gambino, and he contracted Joe Colombo to do the deed. Colombo took the contract and agreed to make it happen. But he went to some of the members of the commission and spilled the beans. And as a result, Malioco was forced into early retirement, as was Joe Bonanno. And as a reward for upending the plan, the commission made Colombo the family boss. The name of the Borgata was changed to the Colombo family and still bears that name today. By all accounts, he was the youngest Mafia Don in the U.S. at the time. Many in the family questioned the commission's choice of Colombo as the head of the new crime family, and in the words of the Mob Museum, who writes, "Joe Colombo didn't fit the mold of a typical mafia boss, at least in the minds of those who opposed them. Though he was a rising capo in the Franzese crime family, Colombo's criminal record up to that point contained 2 little infractions, a $1 fine for each." But is this statement legitimate? I don't know. Colombo had risen to the rank of capo, and you don't do that by being a teetotaler. In fact, according to reports, Colombo did increase the family's take. They were involved in the normal rackets like shellocking, hijacking, and union takeovers. By the 1970s, and probably before, Colombo came to the attention of the feds, with the arrest of his son, Joe Jr., who was charged with melting down coins, and as a result, Colombo began the Italian-American Civil Rights League. He did this because he stated the feds were unjustly targeting Italians by assuming they were all criminals. Get this, a criminal convinces law-abiding Italians to join him in protesting law enforcement when he is the one actually committing crimes, and they went along with him on this. You can't make this stuff up. Just like Al Capone and John Gotti, Colombo loved the media attention the League got. And a lot of it, if not all of it, focused on him. Even Hollywood came to him and asked for permission to do things. For example, at first Colombo opposed the making of the movie The Godfather, but then he supported it. Why? The National Crime Syndicate explains. Paramount Pictures even worked with Colombo and sought his assistance in the making of the movie The Godfather, and advised the film's producer to remove any mention of La Cosa Nostra and Mafia from it. Under Colombo's leadership, the Italian-American Civil Rights League grew exponentially and received nationwide attention. He was interviewed on television and attended numerous fundraisers and had many speaking engagements. He called for a rally on June 29, 1970, taking place at Columbus Circle in New York City that was attended by 50,000 people, some say 100,000. When it was over, everyone considered it a success. That is, everyone but the commission. They didn't like the fact that Colombo was in the spotlight. That brought all of them in also. So they told Colombo to cool it. Nobody takes on the federal government and wins. They have too many resources. By 1971, a man named Joe Gallo was released from prison. Called Crazy Joe, who may have been involved in the assassination 10 years earlier on the Mad Hatter Albert Anastasia, Gallo thought he should be the head of the old Profaci family. Crazy Joe had a beef with Profaci, and he continued it with Colombo. As a supposed conciliatory gesture, Colombo invited Gallo to a peace meeting and offered him $1,000. Gallo refused the money, wanting $100,000 to stop the conflict, which Colombo refused to pay. So the conflict continued. By the time of the Second Italian-American Civil Rights Rally, all hell broke loose. In the description, there is a link to Michael Franzese's webpage explaining what happened next. He was there, and you get a first-hand description of the events. By the way, his webpage is excellent, and I encourage you to subscribe. Again, there are about 50,000 people on hand. The Mob Museum writes, smiling and unaware of looming danger, the 48-year-old crime family boss cheerily greeted guests who arrived for the big Unity Day festival at Columbus Circle. A man brandishing both press credentials and a revolver approached Colombo. From point-blank range, he fired 3 shots into Colombo's head. The bloody scene turned even more chaotic. The shooter's name was Jerome A. Johnson, and he was killed at the scene by Colombo loyalists. Was he a lone gunman? Was he sent by the commission to silence Colombo? Maybe the feds did it. Many believed it was probably Crazy Joe who actually set up the hit, and they're probably correct. Again quoting the Mob Museum, witness accounts of what happened thereafter varied and ultimately proved inconclusive as to who fired the fatal rounds into Jerome Johnson. But it was no doubt who fired the shots at Colombo. Colombo was left paralyzed and in a coma and remained that way for nearly 7 years. He lived out those years in his Brooklyn home, passing away on May 22, 1978. The doctor stated that he passed away from cardiac arrest brought on by the events of the shooting. He's buried at St. John's Cemetery in the Queens.